What's up, people? Welcome back to another episode of Stars and Garters. I'm Katie Pettit, and I do know how to read, and consequently, I do like books. And if someone like random on the street were to ask me who my favorite author was, I would probably give them, like, honestly, I would probably say a safe answer. I would probably be like, oh, it's J.K. Rowling, or like it's Gordon Corman, which is like slightly less normal, but it's still like an author of typical books. And don't misunderstand, I love both J.K. Rowling and Gordon Corman's books. They both hold a spot in my top 10 books list, which you should go watch. However, that would be a lie. That's not my favorite author. And, like, I know that I would get some looks if I were to say that my favorite author was an author of comic books. So, today we're going to talk about my favorite author, and we're going to talk about why he's my favorite author and why he counts even though he is a comic book author. Now, sure, you could say that it's almost unfair for me to love Tom Taylor this much because he did a run on my third favorite of all time Marvel character, X-23, and then he did a run on my favorite DC character of all time, Nightwing. But just because they work with characters I love doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to like them as a writer. What I love about Tom Taylor's writing and not just comic book writing, just writing in general, just the way he writes stories is something that I think the entire superhero genre industry really needs right now. So, for context, I do want to tell you guys a little bit about these series, so that because I'm willing to bet, like, I bet that half of you or all of you have never read anything by Tom Taylor, because most of you probably don't read comic books, to be honest. I know who my audience is. But if you do, that's great. But to give you some context, he did a run on X-23 called All New Wolverine. I don't have the whole series, I'm missing like 2 books. But basically, the story happens when Logan has just died. I think he got, like, drowned in molten adamantium or something, but he did. So Laura has taken up his mantle, and while she is doing her hero stuff, she discovers this company called Alchemax. And what Alchemax has done is it has found her DNA being a clone of Wolverine, and they found her DNA, and so they made more clones of her. One of these clones happens to be Gabby Kinney, who is I think she's my 6th favorite Marvel character of all time. That's her. But anyway, Laura's clones are obviously incomplete. They're literally a clone of a clone, so they are damaged, and most of them have died. And Laura has to team up with the 3 living clones, Zelda, Bella, and Gabby, to take down Alchemax, while basically having to, like, speedrun teach them that they don't need to kill everyone they see, which Laura herself got years to learn. She has to teach her clones, like, in 3 days to take down this company without just straight up murdering everybody. In the end, Zelda dies, Bella leaves, and Laura is left as basically Gabby's caretaker. So that's the rest of the story, is her and Gabby going on different missions together and growing kind of a relationship together as she tries to give her some semblance of a normal life, but eventually realizes that doesn't really happen for clones and superheroes. Nightwing, on the other hand, Tom Taylor also did one of the most recent runs. Like, this is a recent comic, and I really, really love it. It's one of the most recent runs on Nightwing. He puts Nightwing back in Bloodhaven after the death of Alfred. Rip my goat. I didn't even know Alfred died until I read these comics. He might not even be dead now, because we know how comics be, but he was dead, and he is dead in this comic. Nightwing's still doing his hero stuff, still hanging out in Bloodhaven, and he's kind of trying to figure out what exactly his hero thing is when he's not being a member of the Bat Fam, or fighting with the Bat Fam, or being a member of the Titans. He's kind of trying to figure out, like, what is his own thing and what kind of impact he can make when he's a superhero on his own. So currently he starts out, he's trying to help the homeless in Bloodhaven with the new wealth that he has acquired from Alfred's will, because Alfred turned out to be rich as well. And then his old pal Blockbuster shows up to stop him because he controls the city and he doesn't like homeless people, along with Blockbuster's new murdery pal Heartless. So Nightwing has to work to save his city from corruption and also from a creepy new serial killer who just, like, rips out people's hearts and collects them. He also gets a dog, and he names her Bitewing, which is not exactly a huge part of the story, but it's cute, and she's wonderful. Here she is. She's a dog. So, that was just for context, and those were some very bare bones summaries just to keep myself from rambling about them like I have in the past, because I know I tend to do that. So, it's entirely likely that you didn't catch the big similarity between the two. But it is the reason why I love Tom Taylor so much. Tom Taylor's biggest strength, and the reason that I personally enjoy his writing more than any other writing I've read before, is that his characters are deeply character driven. Taylor understands that Laura she's not just a wandering clone anymore. She's not just trying to figure out if she's a real person anymore. She knows who she is, she's grown, and she is secure in her own person, and she's now trying to carry on her father's legacy. So, like, it's comics, so that's a point where it feels very difficult, can feel very difficult to carry on a character's story. She doesn't need another who am I? Do I have a soul? Am I worth saving? Like that kind of arc. She's done that. She's been there. She has faced most of her old trauma. So what Taylor does is he brings her back to the root of that trauma, and he has her try to kill it so it doesn't hurt anyone else. But of course it does hurt someone else because the plot has to carry on, and she's literally the only person who can understand what her clones are going through, and that carries on her story. And then with Nightwing, he's been through the Son of Batman story angst more times than anyone can count. Taylor understands that this is a grown man. Dick is grown now. He has learned who he is, and he has learned how to be kind and good, and just at his core, Dick just wants to make things better for people who are hurting. So then his story is about just that. Nightwing always trying to help the next person, and it doesn't try to make him anything more. And side note, you might have picked up on it, those are both legacy heroes, and all superhero fans know that how hard it is for legacy heroes to be acknowledged and liked by the fan base. But I know the Nightwing run did really well. I'm pretty sure the All New Wolverine did pretty well. Also, I'm not completely sure though. Even though DC definitely has better luck with its legacy heroes just in general rather than Marvel. But comics wise, at least. So why his writing is just matters in general, like beyond the scope of comics, and why I love it so much. So I did say that this is something that the superhero genre specifically needs, because that's something I know very well, but I think it's something that all writing could use. Something that comics and superhero movies have been struggling with lately is trying to impress the audience by with crazy plot lines and twists and visual spectacle that will make you go whoa for a minute and then forget about it. This can be seen comics wise in the recent Krakoan era of X-Men comics, where the idea was that mutants have found this whole utopia where they can theoretically never die. Wow. Except that after that first wow, you realize that it makes it really boring, and none of the stories really matter because there is zero stakes. Absolutely no stakes. And for maybe a more known or mainstream example, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness wants you to be like, whoa, the timelines, alternate realities, cool concept, huh? Also cameos. Yes, cool concept, but why does this matter to Strange or America Chavez or anyone besides Scarlet Witch, who, I do digress, I think they handled her story pretty well, weirdly, in the movie. But why does this matter to the heroes? It failed to connect the story to the characters. And I'm not saying that these kind of stories need to just shut up and be super grounded, down to earth, zero spectacle stories. If I wanted that, I wouldn't be a superhero fan. I would watch something else, because there are those kinds of stories, and they are not what superhero stories are intended to be. But all the spectacle, all of that falls flat when you don't know who your characters are. Some people love stories with super complicated plots to untangle. Some people love stories with totally immersive worlds. I love stories with relatable yet inspiring characters. And you can love stories for whatever reason. That's You know, there's no wrong reason to like something, but I think that just superhero stories in general have always worked better when they are character driven, and even in other stories, knowing your characters is always important, even if it's not, even if the point of it is not to be a character driven narrative. You still need to know who your characters are, and they need to be fleshed out. Even if they are not the main point, they need to be more than just vessels for the plot line, if that makes sense. Again, I want to emphasize that Tom Taylor is not my favorite comic book author. He is my favorite author, period. I think he understands characters better than anyone I've ever read, genuinely. Which is, honestly, I think it's even more impressive that he does it with characters that have had years and years of comics worth of history. And I think it's harder for comic book writers because authors usually, they're your characters. You created them, you created their whole story. Like, you should know these characters by now, and like it shouldn't be that hard to have a good sense of who your characters are because you've created them. You created the entire world that they're in. Comic book authors don't get that luxury most of the time. They are given characters that have decades of history. And even though maybe X-23 doesn't have decades and decades of history, they still have to work with pre-established characters who are in the middle of they're constantly in the middle of their arcs, kind of. And that's very difficult as an author. Comic writers, especially, but all authors should take a page out of Taylor's book and make sure they know who their characters are and where they're at in their story. Characters need to be developed, and he takes characters that are already developed and gives them something that makes them develop further, which is just it's perfect for me because I already love these characters, and instead of trying to be like, wow, here's this new thing, he's a vampire now, which happened recently, or trying to, switch up their character completely to get a dramatic, quick reaction. He understands who the character is and who the character always was at their core, and he revolves the story around that. So yeah, he's genuinely my favorite author. I think all authors could, if they could understand their characters as deeply as Taylor did, and with characters that they created, that is a what am I trying to say? That is the building blocks for an incredible story. Also, don't be ashamed if your favorite author is a comic book author, because then I won't have to be ashamed either. But yeah, Tom Taylor. Go read his books. I don't even know if you can see his name there. But yeah, that's my favorite author. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and comment and share and do the things, and I will see you guys later. Bye bye.